Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Burch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Burch, and this is the first of what I think is going to be many Tips with Tiz episodes. These super quick teaching tips are coming from one of my dearest friends and colleagues, Mr. John Tisbert, out of Savannah, Georgia. Tiz is one of the most high energy and experienced teachers out there, and I had the sincere privilege to learn from him in my early days of teaching. There was a summer camp that we worked together at, and he taught me how to really apply all of the score analysis that we were doing in college at the time to actual rehearsal with little people in front of you for 2 weeks. It was amazing. And then I got a job in Savannah, and Tiz and I got to team teach for a couple years. And learning from that authentic collaboration is a big part of who I am today as an educator. I am so indebted to Tiz, and really, this episode is one of the many reasons that I decided to start the Music Ed Matters podcast. Speaking of which, we're coming up on episode 50. Mark your calendars, it's going to be epic. We're going to talk about where the episodes all came from and where the podcast came from, and there's going to be a surprise guest for that one. But back to Tiz. This is one of the reasons I started the podcast, to highlight the fact that there are so many amazing educators out there, and to get their ideas and their strategies and the things that are working for them out to you, the listener. And you, my friend, you're one of those experts. That's why you're listening to this, because you want to be a better person. You want to be a better teacher. You want to hone your craft. So know that what you're doing is really awesome. And I can't wait to have an opportunity to hear what you do so that we can share it one day on the podcast. But anyway, back to Tiz and back to this teaching tip episode. I wanted to make sure that the podcast brought you ideas to think. Now, this approach to sight reading might not be the perfect thing for your singers, but that's not the point. It's not about being perfect or copycatting exactly. It's about getting those creative juices flowing, as we heard a couple episodes ago from Andrea Ramsey. You can find inspiration anywhere. You just have to look and ask the questions. So I hope that these teaching tips with Tiz help you get excited about creativity and see inspiration and find ways to better reach your students, your singers, your choir, your next level, whatever that is. There's no wrong answer. Just keep thinking. I'm so glad you're listening today, and I cannot wait to share this first ever teaching tip with Tiz on sight reading. Quick announcement about our friends over at the Unison Choral Company. They have huge news. These days, we have an app for almost everything. We love to automate, schedule, take the, quote, thinking out of life if we can, and it's no different for choir directors. The Unison Choral Company has created a tool that takes the load off of you and puts it on Google. Don't worry, they'll be fine. So that you can create a schedule that works for you and your choir and make the most beautiful music in the time that you actually have. Not that, made up amount of time that we assume that we have. We all get it anyway. Their free tool, the Repertoire Rehearsal Calculator and Scheduler, allows you to calculate to the minute how much time you actually have during a rehearsal or a semester or a given period to focus on actual repertoire before your concert. It's a fillable Google sheet. The free calculator actually helps you understand down to the minute how much time you can afford to spend on each piece you're rehearsing, so you never have to say, where did the time go? Or, in this case, I don't have time for sight reading. That's a lie. Check out the link in the bio and grab your free calculator today. I'm so thankful for our friends over at the Unison Choral Company. Can't wait to hear what you do with their rehearsal calculator and scheduler. Let me know.
All right. Hey, guys.
This is John Tisbert. Yeah, he is one of the most amazing teachers ever, especially with those middle school kiddos and the upper elementary. And I had the privilege of working with Mr. Tisbert when I was in my early stages of my career. Thank you, Tiz, for guiding me.
Right back at you, because it was a two-way street, and that was so much fun.
We have so many good stories. There's a million. That could be a whole nother conversation. But I am excited to talk to you about something that I feel you do exceptionally, among other things. Your sight reading sequence is exceptional, and I know that because of seeing your third graders through eighth graders sight read exquisitely. Can you talk us through what is your sequence? Where did it come from? How do you use it from K through 8?
Okay, so obviously I don't see pre-K through third grade kids, although I am team teaching sometimes with third graders, and I see them in smaller groups. But you have to go back to the beginning, and the beginning starts with solfege and movement games back in kindergarten. High, low, high, low. We really work with that, and we go from that to moving to hand signs, and every day we sing songs, and every day we're singing patterns, and sometimes it's just echoing patterns, and then you move on. There's we don't make it an intellectual focus right from the beginning. It's like we sing random patterns. Well, actually there's a sequence, right?
Right.
Following the Kodai process, so la mi re do, and we say pentatonic, and we stay in those areas really all the way through third grade. When I get the students in third grade, hold on, I wonder if I have anything. I do. We start with the same things. We start with echoing the patterns. I write, patterns on the board, just like, mi, re, do with MRD. And then from there, we go on and we start singing with flashcards, and we keep going with those flashcards. From the flashcards, we continue on, and this takes a while. This takes a good long time. We begin to start learning scales, because for me, learning the scales is really that piece to sight singing that's really important. If you can't sing a major scale, you cannot sight sing. If you can't sing it in tune and remember where do is. So we go from patterns to, okay, flashcards, so we see it now, to scales. And then before we begin to start looking at my charts on the floor, which is a big thing that we do with charts, and I'll explain that in a minute. Before we do that, we use baby staffs on the floor. Do you remember?
This is one of my favorite activities.
And the butterfly that
yes.
you taught me this, the fish and the butterfly with a piece of yarn. Well, we've taken, I still have those fish and the butterfly.
Those things are so old.
But now our next step with fourth graders, and we've done this with third graders too, if they're particularly smart, we create 3-line staff on the floor with masking tape. And now when we're singing patterns, kids have to place their fish and their butterfly on the staff on the floor. And it's really a melodic dictation.
Right.
It really is. I mean, we can do it a number of ways. We can practice it with our bodies and jumping up and down on the, when we're done sitting down for so long on the floor, we can stand up and sing, actually do to so. We're not doing the entire scale there, but those are all a huge wealth and variety of activities before we start to try to get upper grade intellectual about it and being theoretical about it and understanding that part of it.
So it starts with like the oral memory. It starts with the kinesthetic movement, and then it's the actual tangible literacy of putting it on the staff. And those butterflies and fish were so fun because even the first graders could put a butterfly above the line and a fish below the line. And that was such a big thing when we talk about on the line or in the space. I just remember seeing them get it and then watching them progress through your choir. And those were some of the most amazing 8th graders I'd ever seen. But they started with fish and butterflies.
Fish and butterflies. And in your Rise chorales, you have a couple of them that are they're just brilliant. I have an 8th grader. Can I say the student's name, first name, or should I not?
No, don't say her name.
So I have an 8th grader that you have that I put out sight singing for the kids right now as we're working online that I struggle with. And she's like, boom, got it. But they really use those, using those manipulatives, being kinesthetic learners, body solfege to learn the scales. We still do that in 7th and 8th grade sometimes. toes are do, top of the bald spot is do again, So where the bald spot
Right.
is T and do. We still do that.
Because
But
you're
now
addressing all the learning styles. And I think that what
exactly.
you're saying is there has to be a body of experience and a memories. And that's a lot of the MLT approach as well, where they get away from the so me, which is totally fine if that's your jam. But they get all these different melodic ideas and rhythmic ideas in the head. And then what? So you've
And then,
done
yeah.
floor staffs, you've done flashcards, then what happens?
Yeah, well, and to going back to so me, in American folk music, we want to go to mi re do as fast as possible because of the harmonic implications. So the next step, and this would be if we weren't doing online learning, we're kind of doing this online. But the next step, and I do this at fourth grade around this time of the year. So this is February. I take 2 measure patterns and I usually keep it in the key of F, so everything can mostly stay on the staff. First things, we don't move do around too much yet. 2 measure patterns I put on the board, and this is for students that move stepwise and has quarter notes, eighth notes. It's really up and down the scale, and getting your eyes. And together as a class now, I will introduce subdividing the beat. So
Yes.
now my quarter notes are 1 and 2 and my eighth notes are 1. Back in my Kodak days, I did the ta and tt thing. I now use a quarter note as 1. 2 eighth notes are 2 things, so it could be 1, 2 things, 1. It's just, it doesn't matter what you use.
No, it doesn't matter what you use as long as there's a frame of reference that works for you, your personality, and your kids.
Exactly. And eventually I want my 7th and 8th graders to go 1 and 2 and understand that, but we don't need to do that right awe. That is
building
too
in the
much.
subdivision, which is so important. We call it Tis World when we count like that in our choirs, because I've had so many kids grow up with you that I say, hey, we're gonna use Tis counting. And all of a sudden, you hear all these people beating on their bodies, and it's like, duh.
And I love, some of my students will subdivide with hand signs, and that's awesome. And I think that's from the Emmy world.
That's my world.
Yeah. And some of them are here, and some of them are. So I had a student this morning. This is a 6th grade student, and she's way smarter than me. Many of them are. She didn't move one bit, but her rhythm was like right on. She's just doing it in her head. Those are the smart kids. I try not to get into their process, but I really want people to physically do it. So at first, it doesn't have to be 1 and 2 and. It's just count 1, 2, 1, 2, and
because you're counting the eighth notes in it, feeling the subdivided beat.
Exactly. And now with the 4th grade, we're doing it all en masse. We're doing it together. We're moving it, and we're singing, and what we're doing, and we're doing it so many times that we're not independent yet. So we're trying to build independence. If you do it enough together with a class, and then every once in a while say, hey, Johnny, would you do it? They can.
Yes.
Because they
feel comfortable.
And
we were just talking about that with rote singing, how important it is before you let them open their mouth to sing that they feel comfortable.
Exactly. I mean, so that, and I spend the rest of 4th grade at that level.
When do you label it as subdividing? Do you do that right away, or do you?
I let them know when because many of them, I've taken piano lessons, or I've done this, I know this about it. And many of them know that a quarter note gets 1 beat, and half notes get 2 beat. And I explain it right off from the beginning. Yes, we are using this word. It's called subdividing, which means we are splitting this beat in half, and we're counting every single little eighth note. They don't quite get that yet, and they don't have to. What they have to do is just do it, because it's sort of the whole spiral, the Jerome Bruner spiral kind of curriculum thing, where you can do everything that we're doing in music at one level or in another. And eventually it gets deeper and deeper, and they'll begin to understand. But they must do first.
So 4th grade is all together, learning about subdividing. They've already had all these oral memories and kinesthetic
Yep.
memories and tactile literacy things. They've learned their major and minor scales. Have they learned chromatics yet? When do you introduce chromatic
Um,
scale?
well, I have fourth graders right now that can do chromatic. It depends on the group. I really don't introduce chromatic scale until fifth grade.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
that's where now, and that's another piece that we've been doing online. Um, that's a struggle online if you're trying to learn the chromatic scale at first all alone. So that also needs the together singing. The and so like I said, some of my fourth graders, like I've had fourth graders that like just did the research once and came with a little paper with this is what a chromatic scale is, because I guess I'd said something about it and she explained it perfectly. It was wonderful. I hope I have it somewhere. I must
I
have
love
that
it.
that somewhere.
There you
But
go, that
yeah,
spiral again.
yeah, exactly. And so the kids who are ready, they can, and I don't stop them if they can. But basically, for the majority of the kids, we do that at fifth grade. Now, fifth and sixth grade choruses together because I believe in peer teaching and older helping the younger, the less experience, the more experience
Leadership,
helping and all of that piece of it. So
differentiation, all the buzzwords.
all of it happens that way. So that's where chromatic scales come in. But now we take some of the same patterns and some more advanced patterns. So some of the ones that we've been using in fourth grade on the charts, and there's still two measure charts. And again, we start with stepwise and we move to thirds, that's the next. And then we move to fifths as far as intervals to sing.
Okay.
And then after that, everything is wide open. It doesn't matter.
So I
Yeah.
wish that there was a way that I could insert a recording of what it's like to walk into your classroom. One of my favorite times to walk into your classroom would be at the beginning of every sixth, seventh, or eighth grade choir, usually fifth grade too, when they had fifth and sixth together. You would walk in and it was a cacophony of beats and sounds as they're all practicing their reading. But to get to the point where they are independent enough to sing in a cacophony and then come together and sing together, they went from scales, everybody on the board learning how to subdivide, to then working in partners on the floor with those huge floor charts.
That's exactly right.
When do you use those?
That starts at fifth grade. And for anyone, that starts at fifth grade, and for anyone who needs extra help to get caught up. So I would generally, in fifth and sixth grade class, to help each other, we would be on the floor in a circle with a partner at first, but eventually we want to get away from the partner. And it is subdividing the beat. And I actually now ask kids to touch the note as you're going through that. Physically touch the note, sing together, now do it alone. Doing that doesn't take a lot of time. It really gets them into a point where now I can sit down in chorus with the piece. And so we're still all unison. At the beginning of chorus, we're still singing it all unison, but we could sit down with a piece of paper, and in fifth and sixth grade, we're singing sight singing that has some skips in it, some skips of thirds, coming back to do for me, so up. And as a matter of fact, so mi fa re, they actually can. So they're actually going through that there. And so they go from on the floor charts, two people, then alone, then together in the group unison, and now we're going to start adding two parts.
And so when is this? Are we like sixth grade,
Fifth and
seventh
sixth.
grade? Okay, fifth and sixth.
No, fifth and sixth. Soon, probably by September here, we start in August, probably by September, we're doing two parts in fifth and sixth. And guess what? Singing two parts is easier than unison. Why is that, you might ask? Oh, because we hear relationships and we can hear how it fits together. And then from there, and I always offer tutorials for kids who need to step back. You're not dumb, you just haven't had enough experience. I always offer tutorials for those kids that need more floor time. Let's go back and do more floor time. And doing that. We also, back when we used to have chorus boot camp at the end of the school year, going into the vacation with new students coming in, we would spend chorus boot camp, doing floor time, doing all of that. The more experienced kids always helping the younger kids. I had some years I'll have 5th and 6th grade chorus, and some of these kids that were in it, they are just brilliant. We would be doing 4-part treble stuff, sight singing already by the end of 5th and 6th grade. And then we hit, and then the beginning of each school year, we take a step back and we start with easier, and then we get more advanced. So we hit 7th and 8th grade, and we're doing SAB and SATB sight singing, depending on the group, because sometimes you don't have any tenors.
Right.
Sometimes
It just depends on what you have. I just love how you've really said a lot in that one statement, that the ability to step back, to offer the tutorials, to give leaders a chance to lead, and people who need repetition a chance to repeat themselves. I just remember thinking when I first saw you do these sight reading things, if I would have had that before my freshman year of college, I might not have hated my 8 a.m. oral skills class.
Exactly. You know what? If someone had taught me, well, the reason that I do it this way, I've had some good peers and mentors throughout my life that have helped me out. And there are lots of people around that helped me. But I actually came to the conclusion about how to do this based on, I never learned this in high school and in middle school. And one of my first years here in Savannah, I was teaching it was a poorer school. It was, working class school, I would say. And the kids had never had any of this sight singing work at the beginning. And I tried to do it the old academic way. And the kids, every time it's time to sight read,
which never happens in your classroom, which is also like a big, huge competitive game.
Yeah, well,
time.
You know where I came up with the charts on the floor? I was at a differentiated instruction conference in Florida. I can't remember where we were, with a bunch of teachers. I'm the only music teacher in this. And, during our thinking time, during the whole event, during the training, it's like, none of this applies to me. How can I make it apply to my students? And came into my head. Charts on the floor, physically doing it. Boom. From there on out, once the kids had the background and they have all of the other stuff before we tried, because that's what was so bad for us in college, because we didn't have all of the other stuff before we start here. Now it's like they love it. They love the challenge.
It's amazing. I get to see the repercussions of it in my community choir. I probably have, a handful of your kids, but their excitement of course, you and I are excited to sing scales and do chromatic scales and look at this sight reading I made you. I'm so excited. But so are they. They are on the edge of their seat for sight reading.
I know. And, and when we were all together, we did all these, all the stupid little things I do with scales. All right, sing a major scale skip, sing so in your head. So do, re, mi, fa, la, ti, do, all that stuff.
Yes.
And then singing major scales in seconds. So it's do, right around
getting
the
all
room.
Crunchy.
And then, it's like, we don't like that. Yes, you do. And then we would sing chromatic scales together in half steps, 4-part. All of those things, they've had the stuff beforehand, and now they're at a point where they can do that. And it really helps them, because you hear choral literature and not everything is triads. There's lots of, that's what makes it so beautiful. Some of the dissonances and, the tension and release within some of those dissonances. Yes. And those are all skills that you just need time to do.
And I think that's a perfect way to end this little conversation because it takes time. You going into your working class school when you first got to Savannah, it took time to get them to fall in love with it. But then when I came and visited you there before I lived in Savannah, they were sight reading just like your kids now.
Yeah, they really were, and it was a process for me to get so that I could help them. And it took some time for me to figure it out as well. Yeah. So to all of your students, you don't have to go through that mess that we went through. Do it now.
Yes. And I think you said so many things in this. You have to play with the sequence to see what works for your style, your student style. You found an epiphany at a non-music thing.
Yes.
That's something that Andrea Ramsey just said in an episode we recorded. She said, inspiration is around if you just look for it and ask questions.
Yeah, I mean, I could have sat there at this thing and said, none of this stuff applies to me and be all negative about it. But people were enjoying themselves at this conference. People were coming up with great ideas, and it was like, okay, it planted a seed for me to, what can I do to make this really work for our students?
Yes. Well, time, ask questions, be flexible, but have a sequence. And man, sight reading's the bomb. I'm so glad I learned it from you.
Well, like right back at you. So,
any other tips you want to give before we sign off on this fun, fast recording?
No, I mean, I don't think I have anything. That's really it in a nutshell. And it's kind of fun to watch how good these kids are. It doesn't take very much. And sight singing is not a mystery, and sight singing is not a talent. You can learn it. And it's experience and in having the background and having that sort of bag of, oh, I have all of these patterns in my head.
I think this is going to have to be the first of many quick tips with Tiz. That's what we'll call it. Quick tips with Tiz. Well, thanks for doing this. Sight reading is so much fun, and I hope that you've gotten some new ideas listening to this quick tip with Tiz. Please let me know. Let us know. Be a part of the conversation. Jump over to patreon.com/musicedmatters. Give me a follow on Instagram. Do a whole comment, review thing on the Apple Podcast. Put a comment on the YouTube. Whatever you need to do to feel like you're part of the community. You are. And I believe in you. And I know you're doing great things. And in case no one has told you today, my friends, you matter. We all know that music matters, especially sight reading. And I'll see you next time on the Music Ed Matters podcast.